Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Pastor Amanda is here with us this morning, and we are going to have a conversation today about rest and about incorporating this rhythm of rest into our life routine, into our faith practice, the importance of it, why it's needed. And also we're going to talk about how it can be something really difficult for us to incorporate into our lives and why that may be for some of us. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump into it. So Amanda, welcome. It's so good to chat with you this morning. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into these questions and start with our conversation. So I know that different people kind of approach rest in different ways. And I know it's easier for some people than it is for others to rest based on our personality, on kind of life experience, lots of factors. And so for you personally, how easy is it or how difficult is it for you to incorporate rest into your life rhythms?
Well, speaking as a recovering workaholic, I will tell you that finding ways to incorporate rest into my life rhythms should be easy. It is not always easy. In fact, more oftentimes it's difficult for me to actually just retrain my brain to stop and slow down and rest. I've had to do a lot of work on it. I've had to do a lot of work in therapy. I've had to have a lot of accountability with friends, with leaders, and things like that. But my goal is always to find ways to make it easier. There's just a lot of circumstances that make it difficult at times for me to let go of that old pattern way of thinking.
Sure. Yeah, I hear that. It's funny because my personality type lends itself more to rest comes a little bit more natural for me. It's not hard for me to live very slow, but I will say that again, for kind of other factors that we'll get into in the next question, I also find myself carrying around a lot of guilt for that. It's, when I'm resting or because I look out and I will see other people being really busy or, having a lot on their schedules or, working really hard at certain things. And I will suddenly feel like, well, shoot, am I not doing enough? Am I not producing enough? And so it's not hard for me to rest, but I also can tend to carry around guilt when I do, or if there's a lot to be done around me and I decide to rest, even though there's a lot to be done, I definitely feel guilty for that at times.
I know I need to rest. I know I need to take a break, but how do I do that? What does that even look like? I need to be doing something. That guilty feeling of I need to be doing something.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and this kind of takes us to our next question about, I think a lot of times we feel pressured to do more, to work harder, to achieve more, or also and a lot of this I think is just because of our culture in America in general. Busyness is elevated as a sign of success, and it's actually applauded. And how often, you ask them when you see someone you haven't seen in a little while and hey, how you doing? Oh, I've just been really busy. How often do we say that, and we almost it's this, oh, this means that I have value. This means that my life is good and worthy, and valuable is because I'm busy and look what I'm producing, look what I'm doing. And I think also a lot of us have a lot on our plates. We're kind of trying to balance a lot of different roles. And so there's just a lot to do. And so I think, a lot of times we feel that pressure. So the next question is, do you feel that pressure, to do more, work harder, achieve more, et cetera? And where do you think that pressure comes from? At least for you, where do you feel that pressure comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question and also a little complicated. I would say I put more pressure on myself
Hmm.
to do things, but it's also like so it's a little complicated. Like me and rest for the majority of my life has been such a complicated situation because like when I was in middle school, I survived 3 years of abuse, and it was not my parents, but not my like direct family, but like just anyway. So surviving that, it was really hard for me to want to sleep. It was like I developed insomnia just as a trauma response to the things that had happened. And so even like at school, like I wanted to get good grades because I wanted to, I wanted to be a photographer for National Geographic. I wanted, to travel. But you have to have a degree to do these things, and you have to have an education, and know how to write and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I digress. But so there was like this already built in trauma response of insomnia. And then when I decided not to go to college and decided to go to Master's Commission of Austin, which was a semi-Bible school, but also more ministry focused, like in the actual like church itself. The culture there as a student who was just new to faith, a student who is just new to understanding Jesus and who he is and what he does and how he operates and like understanding the Bible and theology and all this stuff that I had never explored before in my, formative years. Being told like this culture and like a Christian hustle culture actually of like, hey, we're gonna wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you are gonna work out with Chris Blue and you like she's our trainer and you're gonna have 45 minutes of workout in the morning at 6 a.m. Then you're gonna come back at 7:30 for prayer time. So you have 30 minutes to like shower and change, get back to the sanctuary. You're gonna have an hour of prayer time. And then you're gonna do like it's just a full school day, and then the evening we're gonna have these extra projects that you might need to be called on. And like I kid you not, like as a student, my first, second, and third year in this program in this ministry school, the amount of times that upper leadership the upper leadership reinforced and also like created situations that perpetuated it, but like the whole culture was you'll sleep when you're dead. Like it doesn't matter if it takes you till 2 in the morning. I mean, we were pulling all-nighters all the time. The staff would go home and we need students to stay up and do this, like all this sort of stuff. And so it was just like we worked ourselves, had no work-life boundary. And actually, I will say it wasn't until I met Dan, you and Dan, when y'all came down to be the directors of the program and it changed things a lot for the better. That was the first time I remember sitting there and Dan was like, Amanda, you need to go to sleep. Like you need to have a work-life boundary and you don't have it. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Yeah. Like I've been taught that Jesus wants me to work all day, that Jesus wants me to serve people nonstop, that Jesus wants me to do this. Like Jesus, my reward in heaven is to sleep. Like that was what was taught to me about what my faith should look like when it comes to pouring out. Wow. Like pouring in was like that 1 hour of prayer every morning in the sanctuary. That's God pouring into us to expend 20 more hours of work for other people. And it was just like, it took me a long time. And it wasn't until Dan mentioned that and he, kind of explained to me what a work-life balance was and how that really worked, that I was like, oh, so it is okay to like take a break and do something fun. It is okay to like watch a movie and not feel like I should be doing something else while I'm doing this, like multitasking while you're watching a movie, and I still have to fight a lot of those old like records that are in my head that early on taught me that if you love Jesus, you will exhaust yourself serving people, and like that's what ministry school taught me. And to unlearn all of that has been a wild ride, and I'm grateful that, Dan was like, at 5 o'clock, I'm locking the door to your office and I'm taking your keys away.
You have to go.
He was like, Yeah. He was like, I have people watching to see if you are going back in your office because I need you to leave the office. And it was like nails on a chalkboard. Like for a little like traumatized recovering like workaholic who's been told that Jesus won't love you if you don't expend and exhaust all of your energy to building the kingdom and not realizing that the kingdom that I should also be building is the one that he's creating inside me.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so a lot of that pressure that I still have to work through, you know, through accountability, through therapy and all that stuff is a lot of things that have come from just the way my past experience has been, and also things I learned in ministry school and things that I'm starting to kind of turn the tide on, as it were.
Wow. I mean, I'm glad you brought up that trauma piece too, because I think there are a lot of people that are in a similar situation, you know, where, I mean, gosh, I mean, overall, you know, and you kind of really hit on how this kind of Christian hustle culture can infiltrate churches and does and has, but also how I think in our culture in America in general is this, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work really hard so you can get ahead and climb the ladder, you know, and it's this like constant pressure of achievement and doing more and work harder so you can have more, you know, but also I think when we look at that trauma piece, I think it's also, we can't have this conversation without recognizing the fact that particularly for people who live in marginalized bodies, how that affects them exponentially because of, you know, economic injustice, you know, because of systemic racism and white supremacy and all of the things that for some people, like even just to survive, they're having to work 2-3 jobs to be able to put food on the table. So we can't have this conversation without recognizing that that is also a huge issue, you know, that, and that's, I think that produces trauma, you know, where people are like, I can't, like for you didn't want to sleep because sleeping was hard because of the trauma you were carrying. And I'm sure there were nightmares involved, and I'm sure there were, you know, and so I think with that piece, you know, that is very real, you know? So I think in the way that we communicate to people and the way that we perpetuate this hustle culture, like you have to constantly be doing or achieving more and more and more, only exacerbates that trauma that people are already living with, you know, and communicating that, you know, your value goes up the more you work, the more successful you are in the eyes of the culture around us, because, you know, success looks a very particular way, you know, for the culture that we're in. And so I think
it also, like you said, it's amplified when you are a part of the BIPOC community or you're even a female. Like you have to work twice as hard, and it's not a myth. Like I think it's like interesting. It's like some people are like, yeah, but there's so many women CEOs. Yeah, but think about the amount of hustle and things they had to sacrifice in their own humanity, dignity, human beings, like family time, like just their own like time to get there. And the fact that they're still not getting paid what they need to be paid, and there's still, you know, there's still a lot of disparity in a lot of it. But I mean, it's very true. I grew up like my parents worked so many jobs. Like, you know, my mom had like a main job, but then she was always like, well, I need to get a part-time job. I need to get this. And it's like, it's really tough to be a person of color and to be an Indigenous person in a nation where you're not given the same kind of running space, so to speak. And it really does like affect you disproportionately and not for the better, unfortunately. And so there are a lot of nuances to, like, when we talk about like spiritual rest, like sometimes spiritual rest can look like somebody just sitting down for 5 minutes because that's all they've had, you know? And for others, it's like, oh, we're going on a vacation to to San Francisco, and we're gonna like go, just hang out and do all this stuff, and that's rest for somebody. But it just looks so different for so many people. But you are so right on that this like goal of like you got to push yourself to be better, you got to push yourself to be seen, you got to push yourself to do this, because we live in a society and in a culture that tells us that the people who hustle harder get the better results, and I don't know that the better results is losing yourself in the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that even more so, like when I think about myself as a white person, I think that's why justice work also is so important. It's because like we need to create a world where people who are unable to have a healthy rhythm of rest in their life because of racism or whatever, like they deserve to rest. Like rest isn't something that I think a lot of times we look at rest as it's something that we have to earn. Where if I work really hard, then I get to earn this day off because I worked really hard the rest of the week, or, I worked really hard this year. And so I get to earn this 1 or 2 week, time of vacation. And I think we have to shift our thinking from rest being something that we have to earn to no, rest is something that we deserve. And not only do we deserve it, but I don't think it's sustainable for a person. I don't think we can be healthy and whole and experience like internal shalom and I don't think we can flourish without having a rhythm of rest in our life. I think our bodies need actual sleep, and our bodies need times when we can slow down. And so, I wanted to read this quote. I've heard a lot of people in justice spaces, particularly when they talk about rest being like an act of resistance, to this world and this culture, which like you said earlier, it's not just American culture. It's also church culture too. This like, you have to hustle, you have to serve, you have to lay on the battlefield bloody when you're done because you exhausted yourself on behalf of God, doing all this good work, which in a lot of, and that's, the things we're doing are good. Yeah. It's not like they're bad things that we're doing, but like you said, at the expense of your own self, there's gotta be a better way, and Cole Arthur Riley, she has a Instagram account called Black Liturgies. And then she also just wrote a book called This Here Flesh. And there's a quote from her book that says this. It says, "Rest is an act of defiance, and it cannot be predicated on apology. It's the audacity to face the demands of this world and proclaim, we will not be owned." And I just thought, I'm like, oh, that's so good. Like there's, as we look out at a world that constantly tells us that we have to achieve more, do more, for our value to be raised, it is an act of defiance to say, I will not be owned by this culture, by this hustle culture. I will not be owned by it. I'm not going to let what I do sort of become like where I'm so focused on achieving that I lose myself in the process, Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too, because when you were talking about like, we know that our body needs rest, like that's the thing, like we know it. We're not unaware that it needs it. We're just maybe not for me, like I'm maybe not the best at giving myself the best advice. Raising 2 teenagers, I'm like, it is 10 o'clock, it is bedtime. I need your head on your pillow. You can listen to music. You can read a book to fall asleep. Like, I need you to go to bed because I know that they need to be ready to go for the next morning, to go to school, to live their best life and all that sort of stuff. And like, I tell them all the time, but then I also have times where I'm like, what was it the other day? I was like, I stayed up working on a project till like 2 in the morning. And it was like, what am I doing up at 2 in the morning? And I went to bed and then I had to wake up at 6 a.m. to take the youngest one to school. So I'm running on a deficit, and I know I'm running on a deficit. Could I have done that work at an earlier time when I had more free time, or could I have managed my time better? Yes, but sometimes I still get trapped in this. I need to do it right now. I need to, I can do that later. I can do that later. And then it's like crunch time, and you're like, oh, I can't sleep till this is done. Could I have slept? Yeah. Could I have made big apologies and just said, hey, let me get that to you tomorrow? Sure. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes we're really good at like, and I'll say this, like, I'm great at coaching people to take rest, and I am the worst person at doing what I coach people to do. Like,
you're like, do what I say, not what I do.
Take a break, relax yourself, just lay back. And what do? I'm taking out the trash, and then I'm going to do laundry, and then I'm going to go run again, and then I need to get this for a school project, and then we need to go buy these for donation. Like,
it's like you're like in the hamster wheel shouting at people, you need to rest, you need to rest, and you're over here like going full speed.
That is it. And I hope I'm not alone. I mean, I feel like I'm not alone. I feel like there's other people who do that too.
Oh, 100%.
I think the balance of that is not like, and I will say this, I used to beat myself up so much every time I did that. Like, every time I would I was like, you did it again. Like, why do you keep doing it? Like, I have learned to not only give myself more grace, but also like, if that happens, like, it happens less frequently, I will say, way less frequently. I've gotten a little bit better, like more significantly better. But the next day, I will carve out time and take an actual nap. Like, I will make time to recover, because I know that I'm not doing myself any favors. I'm not doing these kiddos any favors if I'm driving them somewhere and I am sleeping.
Right.
Like, right. It's like we want to give people the gift of rest, but we also don't open the gift for ourselves.
Yes.
And like, I need to be better at opening that gift for myself. And I will continue working on it, because I see the good that comes out of it when I am able to set better boundaries with my time, and be able to say, was it my therapist, one of the phrases that she's trying to get me to use more is when someone asks me to do something, she was like, I want you to practice saying, let me think about that, but don't stop asking other people. Like, because I'm the person who's going to be like, yes, I have 5 things I'm doing today. I will add a 6th thing. I will add a 7th thing. Like, I will do, because I love people and I care about people and I want to do things. But also learning to set healthy boundaries has become super important, especially parenting in the middle of that. Like, you get so little space, as a parent, and it's not bad, because I absolutely love these kids. Like, they're incredible kids, and I would throw myself down on railroad tracks for them. But also, what good is it if I throw myself down on railroad tracks because they have nobody to raise them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we have to find that balance, and it comes with setting those boundaries.
That boundaries is huge. Like, and like looking at our life and going, okay, there are just like, something has to give sometimes, like if we have 4 kids and, working full time, pastoring, having 4 kids, plus, trying to keep laundry done and keep the house clean and keep, that's a lot to have. And it'd be real easy to just kind of throw myself into that and think, but all of this has to get done, because if it's not done, then what, like, if God forbid the laundry not get done for a couple of days, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of, it's so, I mean, it's really difficult sometimes for us to make that room and to set those boundaries, but those boundaries will help us be healthier, and they will help us, one thing that I someone recently asked me this, and I can't remember who it was, but I have now started to do this when I ask anything of people. But they asked me for something. I think it was that they wanted to, it was Nicole. That's who it was. It was Nicole. She texted me and she was going through some things and just needed to have a space to vent. And so she was coming over and she was like, hey, I really want to chat with you and to vent about these things. And then she put in parentheses, if you have the emotional capacity. And I was like, that is so kind. Like, that is such a loving thing to do, is to, when you're asking someone to either do something for you or saying, hey, I really love to talk to you. Do you have the emotional capacity for that right now? And that's honoring the other person's boundaries. And it's honoring, like, it's not wanting to put more on that person than what they can handle in that moment. And I think that's a way that we can help others with their rhythm of rest, is being aware that we are all in this dance. We are all trying to figure out how to incorporate a healthy rhythm of rest into our lives. And so when we're asking things of others, to be mindful of that, and so now I've started doing that of, hey, here's this thing that I'm going to ask of you. Do you have the capacity for this right now? Because if not, please tell me no, and the world will keep spinning. And, we will figure it out. So
Jesus will still be Lord. It's great. It's amazing how this all works.
It's great. It's great. Yeah. So to kind of shift a little bit here, what I do want to make sure of, because I've had conversations like this before, we've talked about, and I think ultimately we all with our heads know that our value is not in what we do, but it's in who we are, that my value as a human being is the same, whether I lay on the couch all day long and do nothing, or if I am working and producing and creating and achieving all day long. My value does not change as a human being, which a lot of people, though, that might also make some people bristle, because it's like we can know that in our head, but are like, yeah, but really, like, and I'm not like advocating for laziness. Like, I'm not saying just be lazy and not care about anything and not take care of yourself or take care of others. I'm not saying that.
But also, and I will say this, I think that our society's view of lazy has become so misconstrued in so many different ways that we like let's say it's like a mom and a dad. Okay. Like if a mom and a dad like come home and like the dad's like, hey, I picked up dinner, and like society might look at like the mom, and I'm not saying everybody, but there are people in our American society who would say like, oh, well, why doesn't the wife just cook dinner? Like, that's really lazy of her. And it's like, no, man. Like, this is like it's a group project. Like, we work together. When I am sitting on the couch, like yesterday, I got caught up watching a show with my middle schooler, and I was like, I need to go pick up Vanessa from work because I'm like 5 minutes late. Like, I should have left 5 minutes ago, but I got caught up in this movie. I don't regret the time that I was there, and I wasn't being lazy. I wasn't like purposely forgetting that I needed to go pick up, the high schooler from work. It was, no, I was living in that moment and relaxing and building like relational equity with my family.
Yep.
And I think so often when we say that someone's being lazy, like, there's a difference between somebody, like, we can have different ways to say it that don't give it this negative connotation. Like, if they're unmotivated to attempt that, like, if we've given them all the resources and they're unmotivated, we don't need to call them lazy. We just need to ask more questions.
That's so good.
You just need to be able to say, do you need help from me? Is there someone I can call? Like, what will help you get from point A to point B? It's not like, well, that person's just lazy. Like, they just need more support and a little bit more understanding. And they need to sit at our table and for us to say, hey, what is it, like, where is the, like, rest and activity balance in your life? Like, what does that look like? Where do you find your most fulfillment? And I think we can change the narrative, because that changes our narrative. When we stop saying, like, like our work defines us. Like, sure, like your work gives you money. Like,
Sure.
If you don't show up for the job, you're probably not getting paid.
Right.
But then you probably shouldn't be working there. If you're not showing up on a consistent basis, maybe there's a better job out there for you if that's what you want to do with your life. But like this whole like my identity is found in what I create and what I achieve. And I'll tell you, as a creative thinker, creative like content creator, all that sort of stuff, there are so many times where people will be like, I love what you made. You did such a great job with this. You did da. And all I hear is wah, 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 because that's great. But one of my best compliments was actually from Dan. When I was in Master's Commission, and it was like, you work. Your identity is found in your work. Like, it's drilled into your head. Like, if you are not producing, you are not serving Jesus. You have to be creating this much output so that God can honor that. Like, it was just this whole toxic mentality. And I remember I created a lot of things. I made newsletters, I made applications, I made t-shirts, I made all this sort of stuff. And one of the best compliments that I ever got was when Dan was like, you are a very funny person. And I think that was the first time, and it's so dumb, like, but I remember it because after so long of being complimented and appreciated for the work that I did,
wow,
had anybody ever complimented me or appreciated who I was?
Oh gosh,
like,
that's so good.
And like that has like stuck with me. Like, anytime someone like talks about who I am versus what I have done, like, you can compliment my work all the time. I'm confident in the work I do. I enjoy the work I do. If you don't love it, I want to make it right. But more often than not, I get it right, and not in a braggadocious way, but just
you're
like,
very good at what you do. Yeah,
I'm very skilled at what I do. So when you tell me like, oh, that t-shirt looked really great, like, I appreciate that, but like, that's just, I don't need that kind of a compliment. I want to hear people say, hey, that was very compassionate of you, or that was very kind, or man, you really love people well. Like, those things that are who you are and not what you do.
Yeah.
And that makes me thrive.
That's so like, yeah, all of that. All of that. And also, this Dan guy sounds pretty great. Like, maybe I wonder if maybe I should ask him out sometime.
I think
like,
you
he sounds
should
really
ask
great.
him out sometime.
Yeah.
I bet he would take you out on that date because y'all are amazing.
But for real, all of that is so good. Yeah. And I think, everything from shifting our mentality of laziness, to being curious and understanding that everyone's capacity is different, and some people just are not able to produce as much as another because their capacity, for whatever reason, maybe they're just wired differently. Folks with disabilities, are obviously going to have a different kind of capacity in different ways. But, so I think understanding that every single person is so different and wired so differently, and to expect every person to have this level of achievement and production, it's unfair. It's just unfair. And I think along those lines too, because one thing I also want to be clear on is that I also understand that there are people in my life like this who I love dearly, who, because of their personality type, do find like creating and achieving and producing and like their work that they do, it does give them a high sense of like, it's very life-giving for them, and yes, and achieving, when I think of like people who are maybe a 3 on the Enneagram, the achiever, where that is really important to them. So I don't want to take away from that and say that achievement in itself is bad, or that producing is bad. I mean, creating, I feel like we all were created to create, like I think there's something really beautiful about the fact that we all have different gifts and talents and abilities, and that we get to actually put those to work in this world, and that we get to do things that, that we can look at something and go, oh my gosh, I made that. Like, I feel that way when, like, if I make I love to cook, and I especially love to cook a really delicious meal for people that I love.
Yeah.
And so like it makes me feel so good when I spend hours in the kitchen crafting this meal, and then someone I love gets to sit down and eat it and tell me how delicious it tastes. Like I take a lot of pride in that. And so I don't think that's
yeah,
I don't think it's bad at all. So I just want to be clear that like we can make room for the desire to accomplish things and to create and to produce, but also at the same time refusing to make that the source of our worth, you know?
And I think it goes hand in hand with the way that we interact with people on a regular basis. You know, if we want to get in the habit of not being solely defined, like, you know, not finding our only sense of worth in the things that we're producing, a good practice, like a good daily practice, is when you see someone, like, you know, if you're interacting with like the teacher at your kid's school and you're like, thank you so much for teaching my kid, you know, and I, you know, thank you so much for dealing with my child. It's not like when you look at them and you say, thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for investing your heart into thank you for caring so deeply and loving my kids so well. Thank you, you know, for, you know, bringing your personality into the classroom to help them thrive, you know. And I think when we start to point it out in other people, it gives us an invitation to ask ourselves, what else are we besides what we're doing? What more is there to our sense of self-worth and self-being when it comes to the job that we do? You know, and I think parents can feel this a lot. Like, if your child is not doing great in school, or if your child, you know, as a former foster parent, like I remember having pre-conversations before I started fostering my foster daughter. I was like, if anybody comes at me and says anything about how she is behaving or how she's underperforming in school, if that's her thing, like whatever it is, like we're going to have a serious heart-to-heart, because there is more to the story than what you see in this window of time. There's more to the story than what you see in a grocery store meltdown. There is more to the story. And I think when we started inviting ourselves to say, what more is there to this story about ourselves, about other people, it changes the way we look at what is like, what really does hustle bring, what really does over productive, like burning the candle at both ends. What really does that bring? You know, and what price do you pay in the middle of it?
Well, and bringing up kids, you know, I think about this next generation, and, you know, they're watching all of us adults, you know, going, I mean, I look at my own kids, and I have one kiddo who just kind of like you, Amanda, puts a lot of pressure on themselves. You know, they're not getting it from home, you know, but they're naturally inclined to want to achieve, you know, and they're a perfectionist and, you know, all those things. And I watch this and I'm like, man, I have to be extra careful then with that child to go, I need to make sure that I like overcompensate for that by continually encouraging them and praising them for who they are, reminding them, you know, your worth is not found. Like, yes, are you talented? Yes. Are you super smart? Yes. Are you probably going to get an academic scholarship? Yes. Like all of the above. And those things will always be celebrated, but that isn't what makes you valuable, you know? And so I think if we can I love the things you were saying about as we're looking at other adults in our lives, as well as, you know, the kids in our lives, and making a concerted effort to go, I want to build up who you are, not what you do. Like, are you great at what you do? Yes. And I think that's so fantastic. But to continue to, I think as we're in community with one another, I think that's a really great way that we can kind of combat this hustle culture, is continue to uplift people for who they are, you know, rather than reinforce the idea that what you do is what gives you value, you know? Okay, so we have just one last question that I want us to talk about before we start to wrap it up. And when I think about this rhythm of rest, particularly when it comes to us as Christians, as people of faith, this idea is not new. When even in the poetry in Genesis, the creation poetry that we see that even God rested. God chose to implement this rhythm of rest. And that even in the 10 Commandments, when God gives Moses these 10 commandments up on Mount Sinai to take back to the people, one of those commandments was to remember the Sabbath, to have a day where you rest. And I really do think that as we look through scripture and see those themes, I think there's something to be said for, as people of faith, like we need to have that reminder that our value is not in what we do, but it's in who we are. And I think the Sabbath gives us that. And so I think as people of faith, rest is an important part of our spiritual practice, that it's not just, yes, it's good for us physically and emotionally and mentally, but it's also really, really vital for us spiritually to make those times for rest. And so last question, it's kind of two-part. So first of all, why do you think it's important spiritually to rest? And then what are some ways that you are working to incorporate rest into your own spiritual practice? Some things that kind of give you rest.
I think that it's important, like when it comes to our faith and honoring the Sabbath, keeping it holy, and also, the fact that Jesus rested, that meme that's going around.
And he got away from people. Like when I read that Jesus was like, I am done with you all. I am going over here. I'm like, oh, that makes me feel so normal.
Yeah. Which is interesting because even in my faith, in my faith, I love being around people. I absolutely love being around people, but like any normal human being, there are times where that energy is just exhausted. Mm-hmm. And what I love about, the Sabbath, and really this whole concept of rest in faith is that it's really an opportunity to observe our humanity, to be okay with our humanity. I think that our culture teaches us that we are to be these superhumans. We are to almost we don't want robots to do our job, but we want people to be robots. It's really what we're getting at.
Right.
And it's God is giving us this reminder because he knows how thick-headed we can get about it.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to make this a commandment because if I don't do this, you guys are going to die of exhaustion.
Yeah.
You're going to shorten your life. And not only that, but your life experience. I feel like this gift of Sabbath, this gift of rest that we get to take an opportunity of, whether you believe in, the Bible, whatever you believe, however you hold that space, the reason it's important to couple your faith with rest is because it gives you an opportunity to understand that you were not made to solve all the world's problems, that you were not made of, titanium and vibranium and all these indestructible things. It's a reminder that we are human beings and that we were created and wired to not just give, but also to receive. I feel like it's an opportunity to acknowledge, that we need to lean on God, that we need to lean into what Jesus is doing. We need to lean into this presence of peace, this presence of joy, this presence, everyone looks forward to the weekend because it's I don't have to work, except for pastors who are no, this is prime time to work. But taking that time off, whether it's a full 24 hours or 48 hours or scattered, however you want to manage it, creating rhythms of rest is so holy because it reminds you that you are not the answer to all the world's problems and that you were never meant to carry every burden, that you were never meant to carry all those things. And it is a prime opportunity for you to take a deep breath meditate, think, do whatever you need to do to recenter yourself and just ask God, like, hey, there's no agenda here. I'm not asking you to, make all the things that are wrong in this world right this moment. I just need some time to remind myself that I am exactly who you made me to be, that I am 100% human and you are 100% holy. And not only do I want to get to know you better, but I want you to remind me the things that I've forgotten in the busyness of my week, the things about me that you have said about me, that like now that all the noise is turned down, I am listening, I am making space to hear, and you will remind me all the things about myself that I've gotten lost along the way, getting caught up in PTA meetings, in staff meetings, in, running rides, in school activities, in, church activities, whatever that is, anywhere I've gotten lost along the way. Remind me who I was created to be in your image. Remind me to embrace that peace. And I think that, I don't think it needs to be just one day, but I think it's great that it's a day. Carve out time to just remember your humanity and lead into something greater than ourselves.
I love that, like remembering our humanity. I just think that's so and it takes that weight off of feeling like we have to be the answer to all the world's problems, because it does feel like that sometimes. But that's the beautiful part of community, is that there's this ebb and flow of rest and holy work and important work and work to pay the bills, let's be honest, sometimes there are seasons where we're working a job that we just have to put food on the table, and so, and all of that is valid and none of it is more important than the other, and I think, but taking aside that time to rest and rediscovering our humanity, I think is so beautiful and so important, and I think that that's one way that we can love each other well, is to reach out to people in our life and to find ways, particularly when we're talking about folks who, live in a body that has been marginalized in some way, shape, or form. I think that's one way we can work for justice in that way, is by reaching out and saying, is there anything I can do for you to help you create space in your life for you to be able to rest? Because you deserve it. It's not, you don't have to earn it. It's not, rest isn't only for those of us that, like we talked about earlier, where it's like, well, if you hustle hard enough, then eventually you can get to a place where you have earned the right to rest. And it's like,
it's not your trophy.
No,
no, it's like the key to your house. It's like the key to renewal.
Yes, it is.
Renewed in your mind and body and spirit.
Yep.
That was nowhere. I will say, nowhere in the Bible, I don't think, does Jesus say, hey, if you convert 30 people to follow me, then I'm going to give you a day off.
Then you get a day off.
Then you get a day off. Then you can have someone else wash your feet today.
It's like if you just build your business to this point, then you can finally rest. It's like, no. Rest is just something that it is a given. It's something that not only is it, is that one of the commandments that God gives, but I don't think it's a commandment in a way of meant to be this burden, or that it has to look a certain way. The point of it is, to bring us back to our humanity and to renew and restore us and to give us the ability to keep going in our work, especially if there's something that, I know for me, parenting is very exhausting, but I want to have it in me. I want to see it through, I want to have the energy and the ability to be able to be there for my kids and to engage with them. And if I don't rest, I can't do that. If I don't.
Not only that, but what example are we setting?
Yeah.
What are we teaching them? What are we example? They watch us all the time. They take note of what we do. They're aware of when we rest and when we don't.
Yep.
And if they grow up thinking oh, my parents are great. They do all this sort of stuff. They never sleep. That's what I got to do to get there. Like,
Right.
what kind of cycle are we perpetuating?
Yeah.
Like, here again, like the hamster in the wheel, shouting at everybody to rest.
Yeah. But
like,
baby steps. Baby steps.
You know, like, that's what's so great is it's a work in progress. Like, I've had to lean into other people to learn how to incorporate rest into my faith practice. I mean, accountability partners who, like, if I'm because sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm too busy. And sometimes people will call me and they'll be like, well, I know you're busy. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not busy. Please call me. Yeah. Like, I have time. Here's what we can do. But I'll share one of the things that my therapist had me do pretty early on, it was November of 2021. She had me for a week keep track of my schedule visually. And she made me, this woman, I love her and dislike her. I don't like her at all.
Sometimes therapists are so rude. They're so rude. They
giving good solutions to help me think through my issues. What are you doing? Like,
how dare you?
How dare you do that? But she had me create this calendar, and she was like, I want you to know when you work, when you wake up, when you're cooking, like all the things that you're doing, and I want you to color code it. And so she was like, when you work, when you're spending family time, personal time, when you're eating meals, when you're driving, and when you're doing like your wake up and bedtime routine, I want you to schedule it. Like, keep track of what you're doing all during the day. Put it on this calendar. And you know when they say we're gonna talk about it, that you don't want to talk about it,
right?
And we gotta talk about it. We're gonna talk about the hard stuff. And so, like, she looked at that and she goes, because yellow is like the personal, and she goes, I'm not seeing a lot of yellow there. She's like, why do I not see a lot of yellow here? She's like, I'm not seeing it. I only see right there. Like, she's like, I see it right there. She was like,
you're like, so you don't know my life, and she's like, yes, I do. It's literally color coded in front of me.
I do. I challenge everybody. Like, I highly challenge people. Take a look at your daily week. I know it's annoying. It's super annoying. But having this visual reminder and checking in with her and letting her know, like, where's the yellow showing up in your life? Where's your personal time? Like, and she'll ask me, like, where has your personal time been this week? What did you do for personal time? Because she knows that if I am not held accountable, if I don't have to answer to someone for it, I just won't talk about it, and I'll just do my own thing. Yeah. And just keep going on with life. But there comes a point where we need other people to help us refocus and recenter and not get offended when someone's like, I used to get really upset when people were like, well, you're always busy. And I'm like, I'm not always busy. You just call me at the wrong time. But then I was like, I make myself busy. Yeah. I will. If you call me, I'm probably doing something. That something might be watching macaroni boil. I don't know. But, I was doing something. But it's okay to allow other people to come into our lives and help us see the blind spots, especially when it comes to rest. Yeah. And if I didn't have her and close friends who I gave permission to, like, hey, if you notice something, if you notice my attitude has changed in this way or this way or this way, which is what happens when I get really tired, ask me questions, And so I think it's important to really lean into friends, community members, like, and therapists to really help us get a handle on a lot of things.
Yeah, totally agree. We're going to go ahead and wrap it, because per the usual, our conversations always go a little longer, but, whatever.
We're great. We got great things to say.
We do. We're just so smart. Look at us.
Oh my God.
But Amanda, thank you for, like, sharing your wisdom today. And it's been just a really good conversation, and hopefully it's helpful for some folks, to even just to alleviate that pressure of like if you feel like you are on the hamster wheel and that feels off to you, there's a reason why it feels off, because I don't think that's how we're intended to live. Just in a constant cycle of producing without having any time to, like you talked about, Amanda, to really kind of rediscover our humanity and to rest in that, in our belovedness, you know, that we are so beloved and so valuable just because of who we are. And we need to take time away from what we produce in order to be reminded of that and to rest in that. And it's a practice. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time, and that's okay. And I think that's one, again, a beautiful thing we can find in community is where we can kind of spur one another on in that and be that reminder for people, you know, in our lives that rest is, you deserve rest. So, you know, everyone today, go find time to go look in the mirror and say to yourself, you deserve rest, because you do. Every single last one of us does. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for this great combo. It was super fun.
Yeah, had a great time.
All right.
Thanks for
We'll see you later.